Hello and welcome to Unspooled. I am your host, Isaac Coate, and today I'm doing the April 2018 review roundup episode. I'm going through everything I happened to watch during the month of April this year. April, I'm still working on catch-ups from last year of stuff I wanted to see, didn't get a chance to last year, and finally getting into a bit more stuff from this year that I maybe didn't necessarily want to see, but I felt obligated to mainly for this show, but that's fine. So some TV thrown in as well. So, if you didn't care to read the entire giant length description, there will be mini spoilers and reviews ahead for the following films and television shows. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 3, The Titan, Wish Upon, Game Night, Insidious: The Last Key, Proud Mary, Paddington, The Snowman, Death Wish, 50 Shades Freed, The Florida Project, Your Name, Girls Trip, Paradox, Happy Anniversary, Isle of Dogs, Going in Style, Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets, Justice League, Phantom Thread, A Quiet Place, Suicide Squad: Hell to Pay, Ready Player One, Triple X: The Return of Xander Cage, Tribulation 99, The Commuter, A Wrinkle in Time, then some short films, other TV stuff I have to go through. Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, as well as the Nadia Secret of Blue Water movie. Nailed It, which is a television show on Netflix, a cooking show. So not really spoilers on that, So then some short films I happened to watch this month. Phantom Limb, The House at the Edge of the Galaxy, Spanish Clair de Lune, Interplanetary Revolution, A Different Perspective, The Sandstorm, The Heisters, Paulina Hollers, Pisces of an Unconscious Mind, and I apologize for my German, Wüstenspringmaus, I believe. So that's everything we're going to go through here today, right now. So I'm going to start with those short films, because this shouldn't take terribly long to get through them. So if you're a MoviePass subscriber, you may have received an email in the last couple weeks alerting you to the fact that you, with your MoviePass subscription, if you bought the year plan, that you also received a free 1-year subscription to a service called Fandor, which is a streaming service like Netflix or anything like that. But in terms of its what it has in terms of its film selection and the kinds of things it has on there, it's very similar to a Criterion's service, Filmstruck. It's very similar to that. It has indie films, bunch of shorts, bunch of documentaries. So I was playing around on there, just looking at, okay, here's some stuff that's, these are under 10 minutes and they sound moderately interesting. So why not? I got 3 hours tonight to watch things, I can get in 15 of these easily. So I did that one night. I think I watched every single one of these short films I'm going to talk about all in one night. So let's start with The House at the Edge of the Galaxy. And this came out in 2013. Was directed by Gleb Ozatinsky, I believe is how that's pronounced. Which I watched a couple of his. I liked this one. This was an interesting one. Not much happens. It's, as it says, it's a house. So it's a house that this young boy lives in by himself on a, in theory, completely deserted planet. It's heavily implied that it's Earth, that he lives alone. He's the only person left living on Earth, which I'm not entirely certain how that would have happened, but, you know, that's fine. The film's not too concerned with how we got to this point, just what happens at the point we're at. And he's visited by an astronaut who gives him a seed that the astronaut says will grow a star. Of course, it doesn't. It's an apple tree seed, so of course it grows a nice apple tree for the young little boy to eat apples off of. And that's basically the entire movie. And, you know, it's like 10 minutes, which is perfect because if it's any longer, this thing would be insanely boring. But for 10 minutes, the shots, it's very beautifully shot, very great cinematography on this film. And all in all, the story, I kind of read it as a, you know, be thankful for what you have now because you never know when you might lose it type of parable, something like that going on with it. So I enjoyed it, but, you know, there's definitely a lack of quality in terms of the actors. The actors suck, by the way. Like the child actor is awful, but, you know, it's fine. It works. I enjoyed it nonetheless. Another short film, Spanish Clair de Lune. I know there's many other titles for it, but that's the one Fandor provided to me. And this is from 1909. So definitely the oldest film I've reviewed or watched, as far as I recall. It's a silent film, as you, of course, would expect, you know. You know, sound doesn't really happen until the 30s-ish, late 30-ish, somewhere in that range. So this is pretty, it's a pretty simple film. It's like 4 minutes, very simple. A dude is waiting in a bar for his girlfriend, wife, mistress, you know, some relation this woman has to him. And he's waiting for her in this bar, and she's late for some reason. So, of course, he takes the logical response to your date or whoever being late to your date. He takes the logical response and goes to kill himself. You know, the logical response here. But his suicide attempt is interrupted by a alien spacecraft picking him up and taking him to the moon. And that's basically the whole thing. He then like gets in a fight with the alien and then is dropped back off on Earth and is now cool with his woman being late to their date. So, you know, it's enjoyable for what it is, but it's nothing special, nothing spectacular, but it's solid. You know, it's a charming little simple tale, simple little film. Up next, Interplanetary Revolution from 1924. This is a animated piece of communist propaganda work in which the communists go to Mars to free the Martians from the evils of capitalism. Now, that's basically all that happens. This one was a bit long for me. It's only like 10 minutes, but it was a bit long. I wasn't particularly engaged by it. It was really weird. For being a 1920s piece of propaganda, it's very abstract. It's very weird for being that. You'd think that would be a pretty straightforward thing. You know, propaganda work, you don't want to be overly complex. You want to kind of just nail home your core message, whatever it may be. In this case, capitalism is evil, communism's the way to go in this particular piece of work here. So you want to really nail that home, and they kind of get sidetracked in doing like stuff about like witchcraft and space travel and stuff that, you know, yeah, is, you know, especially for the 20s, a very interesting concept, but nothing that aids you in your intended purpose with this piece of work. And that was my biggest issue with it. As a film, if you disregard the propaganda aspects of it, is, even for being 10 minutes, is a bit overlong and a bit dry in terms of intriguing story and visual elements. But if you take it as a piece of propaganda, it's very unfocused and not particularly compelling. At least to me, it's not particularly compelling as a persuasive propaganda piece. And, you know, I don't have this perspective, but I would assume that even if I was a citizen of a communist country in support of a communist party or whatever, that I still don't think that I would find this piece of propaganda, because in theory, then this propaganda shouldn't be working to persuade me to follow the communist belief system or whatever. It should be persuading me or just reinforcing my support of the communist ideals. And I don't think it works as that either. But if you disregard it as a propaganda piece, it works okay as a film, but is a bit too long, even at just being 10 minutes in length. From 2012, my next film, A Different Perspective. This is like 2 minutes. It's a really short one. It's basically kind of just an animation exercise more than a film, which is that it works on a 3D plane with only a 2D viewpoint. So the frame you see is shown to you in 2 dimensions. You can only, it looks flat. But they then work the characters in 3-dimensionally. It's like they go off screen and appear farther back as they go down a hill, and then they look farther away from you because they're smaller in height and whatnot. So, you know, it's not a particularly compelling film because there's no story to it. But as a pure animation exercise, it's moderately interesting. You know, I'll give it that. It's an interesting piece of animation, but nothing compelling, or it's visually interesting. It's not, you know, thematically or story rich or anything like that. So, you know, if you're an aspiring animator and you want to get a look at how to do something like that, maybe take a look at A Different Perspective. I'd imagine it's on YouTube somewhere for, you know, it's 2 minutes. It's real short. Up next, The Sandstorm from 2014. This is a Chinese work of science fiction in which a post-apocalyptic China, sort of, in the future. Basically, it's modern China, but way more high-tech, and with a water shortage, a giant drought that has gone on for years at the point in time the film starts, presumably. And it's mostly silent. Not entirely, but it's very dialogue light, which is fine. And it follows a black market water salesman, and that's really it. He goes around, he delivers water to a couple people. He stumbles into a married couple having an argument about the husband having a mistress. And so then he takes the wife who runs out. He takes her out to the desert or something. And that's where the movie ends. And it's a beautiful movie. It looks incredible. The problem is the story, there's nothing that really happens. There's nothing compelling, and nothing happens, and there's not even anything happening on a symbolic level, at least as far as I could glean out of this without getting insanely just super picky and taking something super ridiculous out of it that makes no sense for it to actually be in there. So on an actual symbolic level, nothing really was happening, and nothing's happening on a literal level or even on a story level in general. But, the visual works very well done. The effects are nice. The cinematography is great. But my biggest complaint with this is that it felt like a promotional teaser for a feature-length film. It didn't feel like a short film. It felt like a teaser for a feature-length film, which is not what I want a short film to be. And I don't really know anyone that does like short films to be like that. If you're going to make a short, it should be its own self-contained little story that happens and unravels in 10, 15 minutes at the most. Not what seems like a 10-minute prequel to something longer, to a full-length film. And that's what this movie felt like and definitely seems to be. So I didn't care for it too much. 1964 brought us The Heisters, which is a Tobe Hooper directed short, which is a silent film. This has no dialogue in it and is basically kind of like a Monty Python sketch. Basically, it's these three guys who presumably, do heists, rob people, and then they're sorting out their rewards, their cut of the score or whatever, and it results in a bunch of slapstick comedy. And it's moderately funny. It is entertaining, and it's a solid piece of work. It does feel a lot like a extended Monty Python sketch, without the dialogue. But it's fine. It's pretty solid. It's a decent one. We head next to Paulina Hollers from 2007. This is a stop motion clay animation work. Like Nightmare Before Christmas or Corpse Bride, or Coraline. Very much like that, visually, stylistically. The story is about a deeply religious woman whose son is an awful human being, who murders animals, tortures them, whatnot. And then her son gets run over by a bus or a car. He gets run over by some vehicle and dies. And so then the mother goes into a complete manic haze and kills herself in order to go to hell, find her son, and then escape from hell with him. So it's an interesting concept, I'll admit. you know. I enjoyed it. The voiceover, the narration work. There's no actual dialogue. It's just all narration. The narrator's just talking you through literally everything that's happening. Is delivered very fast and very much in like a manic state, like the mother is in the film. And I thought the film did a great job at portraying that, at showing us the mental state of the mother character after the death of her son, and kind of how manic and frightened and unsure of what's happening she is. I liked that a lot. The animation looks nice. You know, stop motion, claymation, you have to really fuck up to not look good. So it's pretty hard to do. You have to almost try to make claymation look bad. At least to me, it just always looks interesting. So I quite enjoyed this film. Nice, good little film here. Then Pisces of an Unconscious Mind from 2011. This is another one from that Gleb Ozatinsky fellow. I hated this one. I have no clue what in the world happened in this film on a literal or a symbolic level. Because literally, it's like a dude grows a fish out of his hand somehow, which then detaches itself from him. He then meets a fisherman who talks about how to fish. And then the guy goes through a tent into another dimension or something and meets, you know, a different version of himself, who then they both come back through the tent and then like kill each other or something. It really bizarre. To me, it was an incomprehensible mess of half-baked philosophies and half-baked ideas. And the acting, I'll at least give it this, that the acting is much better than Ozatinsky's other work. You know, The House at the Edge of the Galaxy, the actors are much better in this one than they were in his later film. But this one made, you know, so little sense. I didn't understand what in the world was going on. And this one's like 10, 15 minutes, and I was bored watching it, which should not happen no matter the length of your film. If you're boring the audience, it's not good, regardless of the length of your film. So I didn't care for it. But, you know, you might, I don't know. Our last one, Wooston Spring Mouse from 2002. This is a 3-minute short, which the only reason I was compelled to watch this is I saw that it was had a recommendation from Guy Madden, who's a filmmaker. I quite enjoy his work. So I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot. It's 3 minutes of a gerbil walking around its cage with some dude talking about the gerbil over it. And it's not particularly funny or clever. It's just 3 minutes of a gerbil wandering around. So, you know, I'll admit it kept my interest for 3 minutes. It didn't bore me. It didn't confuse me. I knew what was happening. It's just nothing's interesting about it, but it's, you know, 3 minutes of a gerbil. Big deal. But, you know, it's fine. I didn't hate it, but, you know, nothing I'm ever going to watch again, but it was fine. So let's head to some films. We'll save TV for last. So full-length films now. We'll start in a second here. So from this year, The Titan. This is a Netflix film. A lot of these are Netflix films. You know, they're so easy. It's just, you know, I have a Netflix account. Like, just pop it on. It's, an hour and a half, super easy to watch. So very convenient. Anyway, so The Titan it's a science fiction film that stars Sam Worthington, which the track record of those, at least as far as my enjoyment, is not a successful track record. He was the main dude in Avatar. He was in Terminator, the prequel, Salvation, I think it was called. So I don't know. I don't care too much for him as an actor. He's not particularly compelling in this film either. He's he's the same dude he always is. He's this military scientist, not really a scientist, thankfully, in this film. But he's the military soldier, tough guy who has no acting range, has no emotions, and is just kind of there to deliver dialogue and, look at the camera. That's basically all he does. Now, The Titan is admittedly not awful. I liked it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was okay. The film gets a lot better. Here, we'll get into the spoilers now. So, the movie's about this government program attempting to essentially evolve humanity artificially so that humanity can live on Titan, which is a moon of Saturn or Jupiter, one of the two. I forget which now. One of the two. So in order to do that, humans have to be able to breathe higher concentrations of nitrogen than is typically able to happen. Humans have to be able to drink and swim in liquid methane, I believe. What we learn actually is happening is that this government program is technically doing that, but their goal is to find the perfect combination of human and other animals' DNA to create a new species of human. It's like one dude they give bat DNA and he becomes super violent. Or they give one girl, I forget now, it's been a month since I watched this and it's not particularly memorable. They give one girl something else, but they give Sam Worthington and this other lady dolphin DNA. And that works perfectly. So they turn into essentially the white guys from Prometheus and Alien Covenant. They turn into those people without the giant muscles, basically. So they're all white. They have dark lips. They can't talk, which that's when the movie gets good, is when Sam Worthington is no longer able to deliver dialogue. When he can't talk anymore, that's when the movie actually gets interesting and gets good, which is not a good thing for Worthington, at least as an actor. For your film to get better once you're basically no longer in it, as far in an acting capacity, that's not good. And these new humans have like wings built into their skin flaps that function as wings so they can fly and whatnot. And, it's okay. I enjoyed the movie while I was watching it. I can't recall thinking about it since then, and I can barely recall the plot anymore. So that's not good, but it was okay. It was a decent sci-fi film. Nothing I'm ever going to watch again, but it was okay. It was okay. Speaking of thing, and the polar opposite of an okay film, we head back to last year for Wish Upon. This was a film that the only reason I watched it is people kept telling me that I needed to see it because it was so awful that it was hilarious. And it wasn't. That's my biggest critique of this film. It's an awful movie, don't get me wrong, it's awful, but it doesn't turn around into being hilariously bad. It doesn't do that. Unfortunately, this has a lot of the same issues I felt the Jumanji remake or reboot, whatever the new Jumanji has, which is that the screenwriters don't know how in the world to write teenage characters, and so they just resort to a bunch of cliches of what they think teenagers talk like or what they think teenagers are into. So you have like this one chick who's really into like Pokemon Go, but it's ghost themed or something. So it's like Ghostbusters Go or something. And so the general premise, it's a horror film whose premise you've seen 8,000 times, and 7,000 of those times it's done better and more interestingly than it is here, which is, this girl gets a music box or some kind of object, in this film a music box, that, grants any wish that she has, but those wishes come at a price. Of course, being that someone in her life that she cares about will die in some way. And then we later learn that you get 7 wishes. Or no, you get 5 wishes, sorry. You get 5 wishes, and once you use the 5th wish, the box will make you kill yourself. It will claim back your soul as reparations for, as payment for, for the wishes. So the movie works on 2 different levels. You have the standard, okay, what's the girl gonna wish for, thing. Like she wishes that, God, she wishes for some girl's face or body to rot. She wishes for her dad to be cool. She wishes for herself to become the most popular kid in school. She wishes for some boy to fall in love with her. I forget what the last one is, but it's stupid. Oh yeah, she wishes for the box to go back in time to before she got the box. That's what her 5th wish is. So it works on that level, which isn't particularly compelling because all of her wishes are stupid. But it also works kind of like a Final Destination film once she makes the wish, where it's, who's going to die and how are they going to die? What elaborate scheme are they going to pull off to kill the person? Like one lady gets her skull ripped off by a garbage disposal. One lady gets impaled on a goat statue. I forget what the other ones are, but those are the memorable ones. So it's not interesting. It's not even fun on a this is so awful that it's fun level. It doesn't even work there. Some of the dialogue is legitimately hilarious, not on purpose, but is hilarious because honestly, some of them sound like Tommy Wiseau wrote them, because it's like, No human being is going to say that ever, especially not in this situation. No human being is going to say that dialogue. No one's ever talking like that. So it has that element going for it a little bit, but all in all, it's just awful, and I don't recommend you watch it even on a this is awful, so we'll laugh at it kind of way. It's not even entertaining for that. From this year, Game Night. Oh boy. I didn't care for this movie. You know, I know a lot of people have really liked it. It's gotten all kinds of praise and whatnot, but I just did not care for Game Night. It's entertaining. Some of the dialogue, some of the humor is funny, admittedly, but I found the plot to be way too insane, way too convoluted for a studio comedy. And the acting outside of Rachel McAdams and Jason Bateman, I didn't care much for. So it's okay, you know. And I will say, if this movie, if we have to praise it incessantly to get more studio comedies that don't end up in 90 minutes of dick jokes and pussy jokes and drug jokes, if we can get comedies that aren't just that for 90 minutes, then fine. Give this thing Best Picture if we have to, fine, as long as it means we get more actually legitimately intelligent comedies like this and not all that other kind of stupid shit. But I still didn't care for this movie nonetheless. But if I have to praise it to get more comedies like this and not like all that other kind of stuff, then I'm willing to do that. But until that becomes a reality, I did not care for this film at all. Did not like it. Up next, Insidious, The Last Key. This was also from this year. So this is Insidious 4, I think. It's good. I liked it. It's a lot. I watched the first Insidious. I didn't really care for it, so I didn't bother with 2 or 3. And then with this one, I was like, you know what? It came out this year, so I probably should, just in case it happens to be amazing or atrocious, you know, for my lists this year. So I kind of felt an obligation to watch just out of that. So at least as far as plot goes, from what I could tell, you don't need to have seen those others to get this film. I mostly understood it. There were a couple things where I was like, who are they talking about? What are they referencing? And that I chalked up to, okay, that's in the 2 I haven't seen. Okay, fine. So, you know, it's fine on a plot level. It's nothing terribly compelling. You know, the main woman has to go back to her childhood home that is now haunted, and we learn the dark secrets of her childhood home, about her abusive father, and about you know, how the house is possessed by a demon, that somehow the demon compels apparently only the men that reside in the house to kidnap, hold hostage, and never explicitly stated, but I would presume abuse in one way or another, physically, emotionally, or sexually, random girls. Um, and that apparently the main woman here, that she in her childhood let the demon into the house somehow. She did that in some way. And that's an interesting idea, that you are physically, you are responsible for causing your house to be haunted, and then you have to go try and repair that damage that you've done with that. That's an interesting concept. I'll admit it's an interesting idea. And it also has some great creature work. There's this one creature that, like, his hands, all of his fingers end in keys, and he like can shove them in you and like turn off your voice or turn off your heart or whatnot, which is creepy and is well designed, looks nice. So I liked the movie. I'd recommend it. It's good. I honestly don't think you need to see Insidious 2, 3, maybe even the first. I don't really remember what happened in the first, but anymore. But I don't think you really need to have seen the other three for this one. It'll, obviously it should help you more with this one, but there was nothing in this one that I was left entirely baffled as to what's going on. There were a couple things that, like, the characters referenced, like, oh, this is just like our last case at such and such's house or something. Like, oh, okay, well, that was one of the other movies. Okay, cool, whatever. And then that does happen with the ending of this movie, where they reference something from one of the past movies, like a case they had before, that I don't remember now. But, so it would probably help you understand the film even more. But even without the knowledge of the last movie's plots, this one still works pretty well to me. Up next, Proud Mary, which came out this year. This is Taraji P. Henson essentially playing John Wick. Not really, actually. I don't even know what the hell to call this. I hated this. It was really, really boring. To me, it suffers from the same issues the John Wick movies suffer from, which is that there's like one great action sequence, and the rest of the movie is so convoluted and so dumb and so poorly written that it loses your interest for most of the film until we get to this awesome action sequence. This movie is very similar to that. The John Wick movies, it's usually the first half of the movie is super boring, awful, and atrocious, and the last half is insane and really, really good. Proud Mary kind of does that, except it's like 90 minutes, and the first 80 is really, really stupid, boring, and tedious, and then the last 10 minutes is this terrific extended shootout sequence that's really good. So I would say the same thing to this I've said to both John Wick movies. If, go on YouTube or somewhere, probably not YouTube, but, somewhere, if you can just get the action scene and nothing else from the movie, if all you can watch is the action sequence, you should just watch that. Just start there and watch it to the end, because none of the plot matters. None of the reasons why these people are killing each other matters, because it's not terribly explained well, and it ultimately makes no difference whatsoever in the story and the overarching plot. None of that matters. The plot is stupid, boring, tedious, doesn't really make a lot of sense. This one's about like 3 gangs that are trying to like have a gang war over some drug deal or some shit. It's so stupid, but the last 10-minute action sequence is really good. So I'd recommend this in the same way I recommend the John Wick movies. Start it, start this one at about the 75 to 80-minute mark. Watch it to the end, and it's really good. You don't need to see the first, the vast majority of the movie. Don't watch, or you will be bored out of your mind and will turn the thing off before you get to the good part. Up next, one of like 3 movies not from this year or last that I'm talking about today. Paddington. This came out in 2015. I liked this one quite a lot. I watched this one largely because I have Paddington 2 is coming to my Netflix DVD subscription here. Might be here tomorrow, but anywho, so I needed to check out the first one. So I really liked it. I love this one. It's about a nice, adorable bear who lived in darkest Peru, and due to a earthquake or something, I think an earthquake, he has to leave his home in Peru and come to London to attempt to build a new life and find a new family in London. And I really enjoyed this. This is a great film that really at its core is about adoption and finding family. That's really what it's about. And it's so beautifully done. And the animation on Paddington is so well done. And the way the actors do it is great because they legitimately look like the bear is there with them. It's not, if you didn't know it was animated, if the bear didn't look obviously CG'd, you'd probably be able to believe that this bear was legitimately there with these actors on set. And the sets look nice. Some of the shot sequences are a lot more creative than they have to be for presumably a children's film like this. And all in all, this is a great film. I loved it thoroughly and highly recommend it. Well, now we get a nice long streak of shit I hated. Starting with the Snowman from last year. Yeah, you know this is awful. You knew that. I knew that going into it. Or I'd heard it was really atrocious, but everyone had told me you need to see it to believe how bad it is, and that it does truly come back around to being great because of its awfulness. And again, I disagree. This is not entertaining. It's not funny on a, oh God, this is awful level. It's not funny on that level. There is nothing I enjoyed about this. In fact, I think the last hour of this movie, I didn't even pay attention. Like, I had it playing, and I think I was doing a crossword puzzle or reading or something while it was playing. I couldn't even I couldn't even stand to watch the fucking thing. Like, I don't subject yourself to this movie. I did not get any it's so bad it's good enjoyment out of it, and definitely know this is legitimately good enjoyment. None of that awful. Do not subject yourself to watching The Snowman. Up next, Death Wish from this year, Eli Roth's latest attempt at making a good film again. The biggest issue with this movie, right? So if I'm going into this movie expecting a Eli Roth film, I am heavily disappointed because, you know, it's not particularly gory. There's barely any on-screen blood or anything like that. Yeah, a lot of people get shot, but it's not, you know, gruesome or anything like that, like you'd expect an Eli Roth film to be. And, you know, part of that may just be, you know, that you have Bruce Willis starring in this, and so he's not willing to sit through a bunch of effects work for that, maybe, you know, or he doesn't even want that put in CG'd either, you know, that could be. But this is not an interesting story whatsoever. Because it's just dude's family gets killed. His wife gets killed. His daughter gets shot, but is technically fine, but is in a medical coma for a month or so. And so the dude goes out to get revenge on the people who shot up his family. So he goes around randomly icing motherfuckers for an hour and a half trying to get to the bottom of this gang crime. And now, you know, I've never seen the original, so I don't know if this is the same in there or not. But the biggest thing that makes me go, no, this is not possible. Like, you know, I can suspend disbelief for a lot of things. You know, I'm willing to go, okay, fine, it has to be this way for the movie to work. But the one thing that I could not bring myself to believe for a second with this movie is that, because basically the driving force of this movie, the reason Bruce Willis has to go out and kill all these people is that the police are too busy, are too overwhelmed trying to solve all of these gang murders, all of these black folk getting killed by gangs, that they're too busy doing that, that they can't find the time to solve the murder of a rich white doctor's wife. That is so wholly unbelievable to me that took me out of the whole movie, because I was like, wait, you're telling me cops in Chicago are too busy trying to solve the murders of black people to try and solve the murder of this rich white woman? That doesn't make any sense to me. And the whole movie, you know, the story as it's presented makes sense. It's just Bruce Willis. The police are too busy to solve his wife's murder, so he has to go kill people and try and kill the people that killed his wife in revenge or whatnot. And, you know, the story as it's presented makes sense. It's just, I can't believe the motivation of the police in this film. I just can't believe it whatsoever for 1 second. The other problem I had with this film is that it attempts, I think, to tell some sort of morality tale about gun ownership, I think is what it was trying to do, and about vigilante justice, and it does not work at all. Because like throughout the movie, you get these random intercuts of news footage and radio talk shows talking about, oh, this guy going around killing all these gang leaders and stuff. And, you know, is this okay because he's only killing the quote unquote bad guys? Or, Is it not because he is still killing people or, and whatnot? So, which is kind of an interesting idea. The problem is it's been done before a lot better and in a way that actually made some sort of sense. And this movie doesn't make any sense for you to be trying to talk about that while having this movie about a vigilante killer reveling in the blood of his enemies, basically. You can't have it both ways here, Eli Roth. And for this to be an Eli Roth movie is insanely tame, to the point where I honestly forgot that this was an Eli Roth movie until the credits rolled and said, directed by Eli Roth. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. What, really? Like Eli, go back to making The Green Inferno. Make something like that again. Not this shit, man. Seriously. Make something like The Green Inferno again, not this. Speaking of The Green Inferno, speaking of absolutely disgusting, torturous experiences, 50 Shades Freed. Boy. Oh, God. I did not bother with the first two. I did not. And I don't think I missed anything. This sucked. Really boring. Didn't really make any sense. There were a lot of moments that made no goddamn sense to me. And I don't think were because of, not having seen the first two. Don't see this movie. I will legitimately say this for the 50 Shades of Grey series. I prefer the books to the movie. Simply because the books are so poorly written and are so weird and are so explicit that it's kind of funny. The movies are not. The movies are very tame. For presumably a film series about BDSM and about exploring kinky sex, there's like 3 sex scenes in this movie. All of them are very standard. Like it's pretty standard, it's nothing I've not seen done before in a film. It's like, okay, standard missionary. Great. Oh, she's on top this time. Oh, okay. Oh, blowjob. Okay, great. Oh, he's tying her up and then just kissing her and then cunnilingus. Okay, great. Like it's nothing. There's nothing sexy about it. There's nothing erotic about it. There's nothing interesting about the story. And like, I even got to the point where I was so bored with this thing. Let's see. I took notes on this movie. I don't ever do this, but I took notes on moments I found weird or made no sense or stuff that had nothing to do with the plot. So let's see. Here's my notes. We spend 2 to 3 minutes on Anastasia's work email address. That's a pivotal plot point for 2 minutes. Is that Anastasia Steele is now Anastasia Gray because she married the dude at the end of the last movie, start of this one. So she's supposed to change her work email address to Anastasia. They then have sex in their car immediately after being chased by a stalker. They outrun the stalker in the car and they pull into a parking garage and fuck right away. Sure. We spend 2 to 3 minutes on Christian getting a haircut. About 4 minutes of Anastasia going to a bar with a friend, and she spends the entire time she's there talking about how she can't stay and has to go home right now or her husband will be mad. We then spend 2 minutes immediately following a fuck session where Anastasia and Christian discuss and can't figure out why anybody would be stalking this pretty girl and rich man. They can't figure out why anyone would be stalking them. This moderately attractive woman and this billionaire guy. Neither one of them has any idea why someone might be stalking them. No clue. A full minute of Christian butchering "Maybe I'm Amazed" on the piano. So those are the pointless sequences. Now, the things that make no sense to me. Christian is extremely upset about his wife becoming pregnant. And then Anastasia is extremely upset over Christian seeking emotional support and romantic advice from someone who's not her. I don't know. Don't watch this movie. Don't watch any of the 3 movies. I would legitimately recommend the books over these goddamn movies. I wouldn't recommend you any of it, but if you have to, read the books. Don't watch these goddamn movies, because the books are at least so awful that they're moderately funny. So the movies are just atrocious, or at least this one is. I didn't bother with the other 2, but this one is just so awful, boring. And for a movie that's supposedly super sexy and romantic and, about having, kinky, adventurous sex, the sex scenes are very vanilla and insanely unsexy as well. Up next, another movie I hated. The Florida Project from last year. This is one I watched because I really loved Sean Baker's last film, Tangerine. And I heard a lot of people saying this was really damn good. One of the best movies of last year. And I want to see the movie they saw, because the one I saw was really, really bad. The acting was awful. And, I have to lower my bar because, the story is mostly about like 3 7 or 8-year-old kids. So I lowered my normal expectations, because I'm like, okay, 3 child actors. So take my normal expectations from here, lower them down to here because I'm dealing with child actors. Okay. And then they are even worse than that. And, I think this film was trying to be about how economic problems can ruin a child's childhood, and about how parents should not be poor. I think that's what this was trying to tell us, was that, like, if you're poor, you shouldn't have children because you're inherently unable to raise a child properly because you're poor. I think that's what this movie ended up as. At least that's how it read to me, was as some stupid shit like that. And, I was intrigued by this movie because initially, reading the plot summary, it said something about how, like, these children, due to their poor economic circumstances, these children have to, escape to their imagination, to a fantasy world they live in. And so I was thinking, oh, we're going to get something like Pan's Labyrinth out of this, right? Like, this is going to be, they escape to a literal fantasy. to deal with their shitty lives. And no, nothing that interesting happens. It's just the children scream and spit on people and are vile people. And the main girl's mother is an awful person. Like she gets her child taken away, and she deserved to, because she was a fucking awful parent. My God. Like, she was teaching her child to like steal and to steal from people, to lie to people, to be dishonest. I've said that 3 times. To fight people, and my biggest issue with the movie. Now, part of the movie is that it portrays the main child's mother, is that she's so desperate for money that she'll do, pert near anything. So she, of course, resorts to prostitution, to sex work. Now, that inherently is not a bad thing, is inherently fine. Sex work, if you have to do sex work to support yourself economically, or out of, because you enjoy it and that's something you want to do, more power to you. That's fine. My biggest issue with it is that it's explicitly stated that, and explicitly shown that the mother invites men over to, to partake in sex with her in exchange for money, while her daughter is in the same apartment. That's my issue. Is like, okay, the mother's resorted to sex work to get herself by economically. Fine, it's understandable. But you couldn't, like, just for like the night, gone like, hey, hey, my friend, can you watch my daughter for the next 2 hours? I have to go suck some guy's dick. Or, hey, can she spend the night with you tonight while I entertain 5 men? Or something. Like, you couldn't have done that, and then like I didn't care for this movie. I found it inherently uninteresting, really boring, and honestly kind of wrong-headed to me. The ideas in themselves, okay, we have to about children of poor parents and how they deal with their poor economic circumstances, whether or not they're aware of it. That could be compelling. That could be interesting. The problem here is that it's not in this movie. It's not done in an interesting or compelling way. It's just really boring, and I really, really despised it. It looked nice, though. I'll give it that. It did look really nice, but I did not care for it whatsoever. Boy. I still got a lot of shit to get through. Your Name. This came out in 2016. God, this was incredible. So this is about, it's a Japanese animated work about 2 individuals who, after a mysterious comet crashes into Earth, begin to switch bodies randomly. And while they do that, they begin to fall in love as they switch bodies. Spoilers here for the movie. Later we learn that not only they're switching bodies, but not only do they live in different areas of Japan, but they live in different times. The girl lives 3 years earlier than the guy in this film. And we get very interesting reveals about, the why. Not really. We don't really ever explore exactly why they switched bodies or anything. But we do learn that the girl's dead and that the entire town she lives in uh, died along with her in a horrific event when a comet crashed into their town and exploded. Uh, and so we learn that the reason they're switching bodies is kind of the universe attempting to allow them to collectively try and figure out a way to save everyone, to save as many people as possible from dying in this event. And it's a very emotional work. It's a tearjerker for sure. And the animation is beautiful. And it really gets into some interesting ideas about time and memory. Not really memory, a little bit, but mostly time and is it really possible to fall in love with someone even if you don't ever physically meet? If it's just, written communication, can you fall in love with someone through, it's not explicitly addressed, but, you can take the logical extenuation of it to, is it really possible to fall in love with someone over, through the internet without ever actually physically meeting or seeing each other, really? Is that really possible? And the film explores those ideas, and it's very interesting and incredibly done. A beautiful and emotional work of art here. Up next, not quite in the same realm of beautiful storytelling, from last year, Girls Trip. So this is a ensemble black female cast in a comedy as the four leads of this comedy. And it does what I was hoping it would do, which is that it makes the story, you're given four black female leads. So you make a story inherently exclusive to them. Where if you had any other types of people as your leads, the story wouldn't work the same way or wouldn't really be possible. You had to have four black women for this story really to work in the way that it does. And I'm glad they did that. Now, this is a comedy. Unfortunately, unlike, Game Night, this does rely a lot on crude humor, on dick jokes, on sex jokes, on fart jokes, on drug jokes, on, a lot of swearing. But, I don't mind that at all. I don't have an issue with that. As long as it's done well and is actually funny. And it is here. It is actually funny. There are some moments that I didn't care for. There's this whole sequence about grapefruiting a guy, which is like, if you're sucking a dick that's really big, that you take a grapefruit, like cut it open and like jerk him off with the grapefruit while you're sucking him or something. An interesting idea, maybe one to take notes on, for anyone out there who may need to use, that kind of a technique. If you're in a situation you need to use that kind of a technique, maybe one you need to take notes on. But that sequence is played funny, and I didn't find it terribly funny, that sequence in particular. There are some other bits that rely upon similar things that I didn't really find funny. There's a sequence about pissing on people that the first time it works. The first time it happens, it's kind of surprising and works and is funny. And then they repeat the exact same joke like 10 seconds later. Doesn't work the second time because you literally just made that joke 10 seconds ago. It's not going to work both times, people. But, you know, very minor critiques there. All in all, I enjoyed the comedic aspects of this, even though I did feel it was a little too reliant upon just being crude for the sake of being crude. But the story I found to be legitimately interesting and very well done, and really a story that, as I said, is a unique one that only really Black women could have starred in and will probably only fully be able to relate to, because the story's about this main woman. Her husband has been cheating on her for years. She's aware of it. They basically don't have any kind of physical relations anymore. They're really only married for PR reasons because they're like a celebrity couple. So that's the only reason they're married, is for public appearance and for PR. Because, you know, it doesn't look good. Apparently, it doesn't look good in the Black community for, you know, a Black woman to go through a divorce. Apparently, that's something that's not cool in the Black community, apparently. You know, I have no clue. But apparently, that's the case. And so this film's really about her deciding finally to open up about this and to be like, yeah, no, it's better for me to be honest and be like, look, women here, I know most of you are probably going through similar shit like this in your own relationships, and you've been just like me so far, and you've just shut up and dealt with it privately and moved on and just said, you know what, if you need to fuck some bitches on the side, fine, I don't care, whatever. You know, but it's not even that, because that is, you know, a legitimate relationship setup that you can have that can work for you. It's more like, you know, if you need to cheat on me sexually and emotionally, fine, whatever, I don't care. But we need to stay married for public appearances. And then really it ultimately gets into, you know, kind of a female empowerment message and a Black woman empowerment message. And I really enjoyed that, you know, even if I didn't find it, you know, personally relatable to my own life in any way. I did still enjoy it nonetheless, and I quite enjoyed Girls Trip, and I do recommend this one. I think it was a very good one. The humor is quite a bit crude. This is definitely one for more mature audiences, you know, so I enjoyed it nonetheless, though. Up next, a couple more movies I did not care for, starting with Paradox from this year. This is another Netflix production. This is essentially a Neil Young concert film with some weird ass, you know, attempt at a dramatic story thrown in. The story makes no sense because it's like it's set in the Old West, but it's like some sort of town where a living history town. I don't know if you know what those are, but they're like where they hire people to pretend that they live in like a certain time period, you know, the 1800s or you know, the Old West, or, you know, like Westworld, I guess. I guess that'd be a good film analog. It's like Westworld, but with actual humans instead of robots. So it tries to do that, but it's like it's distinctly set where it's the Old West, but it's modern times because they use modern technology. And then they like try to do like time's a cycle and is fluid, and they try to get like real philosophical and shit, and it does not work whatsoever. It doesn't make any sense. The parts that are Neil Young songs, you know, the Neil Young songs are really good because they're Neil Young songs. Of course they are. So I loved those parts, but I hated the other, you know, 80% of the movie. So, you know, if you're going to watch this, my recommendation would be when it gets to Neil Young concert footage, watch it. When it's not that, mute it and put on a Neil Young album and just watch the visuals. Don't listen to any of it. Just listen to a Neil Young album during the story sections, and then pause that and unmute the film during the Neil Young concert footage parts. That'd be the perfect way to watch this. Put on your copy of Harvest, and you'll be good to go during this thing. But other than that, don't bother. Up next, Happy Anniversary, also from this year. This is another Netflix film. This one I found to be kind of interesting from a premise standpoint. They don't do anything interesting with the premise, but the premise is kind of interesting because it's billed as a romantic comedy. It's really not, because it's not particularly funny. It's not really funny at all, but this relies a lot on dick jokes and stuff as well, which, as I've said, just 5 minutes ago, is fine with me on a moral level. I have no moral objection to dick jokes or anything, but they need to be funny if you're going to use them a lot, and they're not funny in this at all. But so the premise is that this couple, it's their anniversary, and so on their anniversary, instead of typical, oh, we've been together for so long and blah 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 blah, they decide to look back at their relationship and decide, is this working? Should we really still be a couple or not? Which is kind of an interesting premise that I haven't seen before. It's probably been done before at this point. It's kind of inevitable that every single plot you can come up with has probably been done in some way before. But I've never seen this premise itself before, personally. So I found the premise interesting. The movie itself sucks, but the premise is mildly interesting. I forget what I even said. Let me look up my tweet on this, because I don't remember anything about this now. That's not a good sign with this movie. Also not a good sign of me right now. I don't know. Yeah, okay, so yes, so mostly I didn't care for the way it characterizes the main female lead in this. Is that basically the way it characterizes her is as, the crazy bimbo who doesn't understand her man. It goes that route. And it tries to make us sympathize with the man and go, oh, you should like him because he's the man, basically, is because, like, the way we're actually shown the characterization, the way we're actually shown the character's actions is that the dude is a fucking awful human being. He's a piece of shit. And the woman has legitimate beef here. She is legitimately in the right, but the way the film plays all of it is that, no, the woman, she's a crazy bimbo who's just out to get some better dick. And, like, no. That may have flown in the 80s or the 70s, but, it's stupid, wrong, and it fucking sucks. Like, you can do better than this, people. We can do better than this. And I hated that. The premise is an interesting one, and when it stops being the way I just said, when it stops doing that, which it does that for about half of it, the other half it doesn't do anything like that. It's trying to be very sentimental and, typical rom-com type shit then going on. During the typical rom-com sentimental stuff, it's done well. It does work. It's just, you've seen it before, but it does work. I would recommend it, but just be aware, more than likely you're not going to like the way it treats the main female here. More than likely, I don't know everyone in my audience. I don't know, maybe some of you think all women are just, crazy bimbos who are just after the best dick they can get. I don't know, but maybe that's, something some of you think. So maybe you might like that, but I found it repulsive and idiotic, but, some of you might like it. But I would still recommend it just from the premise alone. It's a very interesting premise, and it's a solidly done rom-com when it tries to be that. It's solidly done. Moving on to Isle of Dogs from this year, Wes Anderson's latest work. I really liked this. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. Which is a little weird because I haven't heard anyone really praising this one. I haven't heard anyone bashing it either. I haven't heard anyone talking about this at all, except apparently Will Toledo hated this. Which you know what, Will Toledo, love your music, love Car Seat Headrest, but really, man, I don't know. Anyway, so I really enjoyed this film. I found its treatment of Japanese culture and Japan as a whole to be very similar to the way Wes treated India in Darjeeling Limited. It's very similar to that in terms of the way he treats it, which is not as a cliche-ridden racist caricature. It doesn't do that the way I've seen people say it does. At least to me, it didn't read as that. It read as a legitimate honoring of the culture and kind of just a it's here and it's just the backdrop for my story. And yes, it is the setting for my story, and it is very integral to the story, but it's done in a more touching, not really touching, but in a heartfelt, I love Japan and I love their culture type of way. To me, that's what it felt like. This whole movie just felt like a giant plate of Wes Anderson going, here's a bunch of shit I love. I love stop motion animation. I love Japan, and I fucking love dogs. So here you go, audiences. Here's my latest film. That's what it felt like to me from Wes. And he also likes political commentary, apparently, because this is an entire film, essentially, on two fronts, about how evil and inherently bad propaganda is, no matter the creator or the goal of the propaganda. It's inherently evil and bad, as well as a pretty clear immigrant message of immigrants should be welcomed into our countries, and we should treat them the same as we do our naturalized citizens, because we have no reason to do anything else. There's no reason to suspect immigrants are evil or want to, destabilize the country or anything like that. So it works on both fronts, is that it does both of those things while telling a pretty simple tale about one boy's quest to find his beloved dog once again. And the animation is beautifully done, as of course it is. If you've seen Fantastic Mr. Fox, Wes Anderson is great with stop motion. And yeah, it looks great. I found, it is very interesting because the way he does it is that, not the animation here, but this film, is done in native tongue. So all of the Japanese characters speak in Japanese with no subtitles. And so part of the time you don't know what they're saying whatsoever. Unless there is an interpreter interpreting for you, but most of the time there's not in the film. But the dogs do all speak in fluent English, of course. So I found that interesting. I liked that, admittedly. I found that to be a nice touch. The humor, spot on. It's Wes Anderson humor. It's what you'd expect it to be. So, the animation's great. The shots are great. The humor's great. The storytelling's great. And, and traditionally in traditional Wes Anderson style, a little bit off center, a little bit, quirky as you would expect. So I quite enjoyed it. And looking forward to seeing it again when it gets out on home video format, to get it out of my library or maybe out of Netflix. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if I have other shit going on that time whenever it comes out. Anywho, moving on. I got some more catch-ups on last year. This first one was one like I own the Blu-ray. I think it was on Black Friday sale for like $2 or something at a store. It was like $3 or something. And like it was something I thought I thought someone might like as a Christmas gift. I thought someone might like it. And they already owned it. So I got stuck with a copy of Going in Style from last year. I figured I might as well watch it at some point. Yeah, it was okay. I didn't care for it. It's a solid but insane heist film because the crux of it is that these three like 80-year-old men rob a bank. Like I can't believe that, especially not the way the men are portraying this. Like I could understand if it's like three 80-year-olds who are like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and are still like super limber and can move really well and shit still. Not 7-foot tall black dude. That probably would be pretty obvious then. But are limber, can still move really well. That I would get. I'd understand that one. But the way they're shown in the movie, like one of them is like on a dialysis machine, and the other one can barely walk anymore. It's like, no, this is not possible. No, people, no. The actors here, you got Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman, and some other old guy. I don't remember his name now, but someone. They're here. They're your three main leads. They don't really give a shit in this thing. They're not trying, really. They're just kind of walking through these performances. They're like, yeah, I'm here. Get my paycheck and I'm out of this bitch. I'm done with this. But they're still solid and entertaining enough that it does make this it is a dull, but it is at least moderately entertaining. It's decent to watch. There's nothing going on here that you're going to be very emotionally invested in, or that you're going to find to be a thoughtful meditation on on how society treats its elderly. Nothing like that going on here. But it's a decent, entertaining film, but nothing I would recommend you watch personally. Moving on to Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets. I didn't like this movie either. I did not care for this thing at all. Luc Besson's one of those directors who, to me, is always visually interesting. I compare him a lot to the Wachowskis in that they're both very visually interesting. They have a great eye for interesting visual. That problem is all of them suck at storytelling. Like the Wachowskis, outside of the Matrix, kind of really suck at storytelling. In general, like I can't remember a Wachowski movie other than the first Matrix that has a legitimately compelling story. Or did they do V for Vendetta or not? I forget off the top of my head. Let's see, the Wachowskis. I know this is a weird diatribe that does not matter whatsoever for this, but I don't care. Okay, yeah, they did do V for Vendetta, so okay. Well, they wrote it, they didn't direct it, but okay. So, I don't know, they were very good at that. That was a great movie. Not so much any of the other shit they've done, but V for Vendetta, at least their writing on it was really good, though that was kind of more the source material than anything they did. But anyway, so I compare Luc Besson a lot to the Wachowskis. in that they both have one legitimately good or great film. In the Wachowskis' case, The Matrix, Luc Besson has Fifth Element, which is good. But I still have issues with that movie, but it's good. I enjoy it, but I have many issues with it nonetheless. So Luc Besson, other than that, he hadn't done a damn thing I've liked. And yeah, did not care for this thing. I think with this movie, and then with the later flop that was Tulip Fever, didn't bother watching it, but I know it flopped horribly at the box office and critically. I didn't check it out. Probably won't. I might. I don't know. I like Alicia Vikander, but I don't know. Anywho, I think with this film and then with the flop that was, that Dane DeHaan's career as like an action star or a main big time Hollywood lead's probably over. It was a good run, Dane DeHaan. You were in like 2 good movies, so good for you. You were in Chronicle and Cure for Wellness. You were in 2 decent. You were in 2 good films. You were also in this piece of shit. Yeah, I didn't care for Dane DeHaan in this movie. I think the main appeal that Dane DeHaan has is that he's like unconventionally pretty. Like he has a very unconventional attractiveness to him. So I kind of get it on that sense, because like he's shirtless for like the first 10 minutes of the movie that he's in. He's shirtless, which I'm not going to complain. But other than that, there's nothing interesting about Dane DeHaan's performance or his character. The only thing that's remotely good about his character is that he's pleasant to look at, really, is all he has going for him at this point. Very similar to, oh God. I was about to say James McAvoy. Jesus Christ. I forget. Anywho, so that aside, we're done with Dane DeHaan being a hottie. We're done with that. So the actual movie, yeah, the story's not particularly interesting to me, at least, because it's like these 2 government agent spy people or something, which is Dane DeHaan and Cara Delevingne. Something, I forget how to pronounce her last name. Annie Clark's girlfriend, her former girlfriend, I guess. They're like these government spy super agents or some shit who go around and like get alien artifacts and stuff like this. And then they're attacked by some alien race, or they think they're attacked by some alien race who kidnapped the like military chief or whatever. So they have to go track him down, and they learn that the government chief accidentally destroyed this alien race's planet, and they're out to get revenge on him and shit. So the story is not particularly compelling. I in my review, in my written review, I said that this is a visually spectacular film. The story comes off as an unclever version of Avatar, which it is. It's an unclever Avatar, which, Avatar is not particularly clever or engaging, but this rips off Avatar and can't even do it in an interesting way. Because you got like the whole, humans are fucking with this species and the species isn't happy about it. But I will at least give it some credit that it doesn't go the same route of Avatar, where it's the alien race has no clue how to do anything until the human white guy comes to help them. At least it doesn't do that. It doesn't suffer from white savior syndrome, at least. But that's about the only redeemable thing about this movie's story, is that it doesn't suffer from white savior syndrome. Visually, it's interesting. I will say I enjoyed Rihanna's cameo as this like shape-shifting gelatinous creature that's a pole dancer named Bubble. I liked her cameo. It was entertaining. It was fucking insane, but it was entertaining. That's the one thing I will give this movie too. I'd say there's a good 30 minutes somewhere in the middle that is entertaining. It's batshit nuts, but it's entertaining. Ethan Hawke shows up. I don't know what he thought he was signing on for, but Ethan Hawke plays this like cowboy pimp or something, and he is legitimately just having a fun time. He's the only one who knows what movie he's in, which is nice. We'll talk about that later on when we get to another movie. But like him and Rihanna know they're in a fucking batshit awful space movie, and so they're just having fun with it. Everyone else thinks they're in this serious dramatic work, and it doesn't. And you know, to them and to Luc Besson, this is probably a very serious, you know, incredible piece of art, and it's not. It's awful. I didn't care for it. I don't recommend it. It's, you know, the visuals are nice. Oh, also, Dane DeHaan and Cara Delevingne, for some reason, at the end of the movie, they start making out. So, for some reason, they fall in love throughout the entirety of the movie, even though there is no reason they should. Like, there's no reason they should. Like as I said, Dane DeHaan is you know, attractive, but he's not that hot. Like anywho, like I don't get it, but you know, the romance between them two is insanely unbelievable. Mostly it's like I can't for a second buy Cara Delevingne being into Dane DeHaan. Like I can't. Like no, I can't buy that. I'm sorry. I can't. So did not like it. Something else I absolutely... Well, I liked Valerian a lot more than this next film. Let's talk about the absolute fucking disaster that is known as Justice League. In a second. Oh, Jesus. I don't know what the fuck DC's doing with their live action stuff. DC, to me, is the polar opposite of Marvel. Well, obviously, but like Marvel is killer with their live action stuff. And then everything else they kind of aren't great at. Like their comics suck now, apparently, from what I've heard. They haven't really tried to do animated films yet. We'll see how the Spider-Man one goes this year. I'm looking forward to that one. I saw a trailer. I saw a preview for that during Ready Player One, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. There's a trailer in the pre-roll for that that looked really interesting. That looked really cool. So I'm interested in that. But and then Marvel. From what I've heard, isn't great at television. I don't know. I've never watched any of the shows because I don't give a shit enough about Marvel to do so. And then DC's the polar opposite. Their live action films, except Wonder Woman, are awful anymore. You know, the DCU stuff is awful except for a Wonder Woman. And then DC's animated stuff is legitimately good most of the time, which we'll talk about one of those later as well. And then the DC TV shows, from what I've heard, are really good. I don't care enough to watch those either, except Gotham. I quite enjoyed Gotham. So far, I've quite enjoyed it. But, goddamn, DC's live action films are awful. Like, Wonder Woman is okay. I talked about this last year, but I liked Wonder Woman, and I was so happy. Like, I legitimately thought DC had figured something out. And I think I figured out what they've figured out. Don't let Zack Snyder near your damn movie, and it will maybe be good. Suicide Squad wasn't, but that's a different issue. But don't let Zack Snyder near your movie, and hey, it might be good. And Wonder Woman was that way. Suicide Squad wasn't, but that's a different story for a different day. So I don't know. I hated this thing. I will admit that I am probably a lot more crueler, I guess you could say, on bad superhero films or bad comic book movies than I am on anything else. And, you'd be right to say that because I think I am. But I hated this thing. Gal Gadot really didn't give a shit during this movie. Like, you could tell with her acting, she was not giving a fuck throughout this thing, which I'm slightly concerned about. Because I did think the biggest weak link with Wonder Woman was Gal Gadot herself. Like, I wasn't sold on Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, that she actually cared. And in this movie, she really doesn't. Ben Affleck continues to be fucking awful in everything. At this point, I've grown to the point where I don't like Ben Affleck in the slightest anymore. He's awful as Batman. Just, I don't get it. I really hope he does not continue on as Batman. Spoilers, Henry Cavill comes back. Superman, of course, comes back. We're not going to leave Superman dead for more than an hour. Jesus. Which was so stupid. We'll get to that. We'll get to the plot here in a second. Henry Cavill's fine. I do like him in general as an actor and as Superman. I think he's good. Ezra Miller. I like Ezra Miller, and I like his version of the Flash. It just felt so weird in this movie, though. Like, I liked his Flash. I liked it. It just felt so out of place. Jason Momoa, we didn't really see anything with him in this movie, really. I mean, yeah, he's there, but he doesn't do anything, really. Like, Aquaman basically does nothing in this movie. But the, 5 lines that Jason Momoa gets after the opening part, he's fine. I liked him. I like him in most anything, but I don't know. Then the Cyborg guy, I don't even know who played Cyborg, but he is good. I liked the actor. The problem is that the script writer here, presumably Snyder, I didn't really care to look in the actual credits, presumably Snyder, does nothing in this movie. Like, he's not even really important to the story. Really, the villain of Steppenwolf, I'm sure you've heard this before, is awful. Like, he has no motivation beyond, I want to kill humanity, kind of, maybe. He's super generic. There's nothing interesting about his character. There's no depth to him. And the thing that I found so insane is that essentially Steppenwolf, it's a rehash from Man of Steel, where Steppenwolf wants to get these items that will terraform the Earth back into his home planet, which is apparently hell or something. That's the villain plot from Man of Steel. And we've done it again. Huh, what? That was stupid. So the plot of this movie. The plot essentially is that every superhero that's not Superman is useless and has no function in the world beyond being there to pick Superman up off the ground. That's the goddamn plot, because essentially it's the Justice League. They all join up together because they have to stop Steppenwolf from whatever. You know, they had to stop him from turning Earth into hell. So they have to do that. And like they try for like a second. They all get their asses handed to them. So Bruce is like, well, the only way we can possibly defeat Steppenwolf is we have to resurrect Superman. And it was at that moment, I think, when he first uttered his plan, that was the moment I went from sitting on my couch watching this going like, okay, this is boring and stupid, but this isn't awful, to it was that moment I think my head may have fallen off from the sheer force of my eyes rolling into the back of my head. I think my neck may have snapped from the force of that eye roll. And it's like, oh God, really? Like the death of Superman. What does the death of Superman lead to? I have to ask, because basically it's nothing. It's like the canonical death of Superman in Batman v Superman leads to nothing. Like, really? No one gives a shit about the death of Superman. Nothing happens because of it whatsoever, and we can just bring him back and no one gives a fuck? Like, really? Wow. And then the one thing that the film has no interest in answering and never will be answered, but that I found so bizarre about this, is that, right, presumably, so Superman's dead. So, of course, that means Clark Kent is dead, right? So everyone, presumably, at like the Daily Planet and everyone in Lois Lane's family and everything is like, oh, Clark died. Oh, God, you know? And then, like, all of a sudden, what's going to happen? One day, Clark Kent just strolls back into the Daily Planet, Daily Globe, I forget which now at this point, but he strolls back into the newspaper office like, yeah, hey, I know you're all at my funeral and, like, saw me dead in the casket and saw me get buried and shit. Like, hey, I'm cool. I'm fine now, man. Like, no one's going to question why Clark Kent is suddenly back from the dead. Like, you know, really? Like, I can look past that one just for the sake of the movie, but, you know, the other thing that I found that I laughed out loud, there were 2 times I laughed at this movie. And, you know, none of them were when the movie was trying to be funny, which I found horribly unfunny. But in the opening bit, like Bruce Wayne goes to go meet Aquaman to recruit him to join up with him, right? And so him and Aquaman are out walking on like the coastline in this fishing village. And there's at least, I'd say, a good 50 villagers walking behind them within earshot. And Aquaman says to Bruce Wayne, like, so you like going around dressed up as a bat at night, huh? Because you're the Batman, right? And Bruce is like, yes, I am, but can you tell me about this Aquaman? Like, so that got me laughing. I'm like, really? So now these 50 random motherfuckers in this fishing village know that Bruce Wayne is Batman now. Okay, cool. All right. The other moment is when Superman's resurrected. You know, the only interesting part of this movie is when Superman's resurrected, he's evil. He turns evil and attempts to kill all the members of the Justice League. That's the only interesting part of this movie. Is that they bring Lois Lane out, and in front of 2 cops, probably more than that, 2 police officers, Lois Lane runs out in front of them and starts yelling to Superman, Clark, Clark, are you okay, Clark? Like, really? Okay, so now these two random cops, and then presumably a lot more people after this are going to know Superman is Clark Kent and vice versa. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, okay, that's smart. Sure. So there were some legitimately funny moments. This whole movie was awful, though. And like, I personally didn't really notice the CGI lips on Cavill. Like, I was staring at Henry Cavill's mouth. That's a weird sense to say, but I was staring at Henry Cavill's mouth every second he was on screen. I couldn't tell, personally. I couldn't. Maybe it's just I'm not great at that. I don't know. Because, like, with Rogue One, like, the first time I saw Rogue One in the theater, I legitimately thought that that was the same actor playing Grand Moff Tarkin still. Like, I did. Or, well, I knew it wasn't because I knew he was dead, but I was like, wow, they got someone who looks identical to him. Wow. Like, I could not tell it was CG'd at all. And then, like, I read online, like, the next day or two after I saw Rogue One, like the biggest problem is CGI Grand Moff Tarkin. Like, he was CGI'd? Really? And so, like, I still can't tell. Like, I know he is, but I can't tell it visually. He looks lifelike to me. So, I don't know. Maybe it's just I have this weird, maybe it's just I'm not great at telling, in terms of human stuff, what's actually CG'd and what's not. I don't know. The effects in this movie were shockingly awful, though. For being so high budgeted, like apparently the highest budget in the history of movies, this is the most expensive movie ever made, is what I've seen. Like, that's insane. The effects suck on this thing for that. Like, I just hated it so much. There's so much more I could talk about, but I need to move on. I've already been here 2 hours, and I got 10 more movies to get through at least. So I'm going to blaze through a couple real quick here. So Tribulation 99 is a documentary from 1991, a fake documentary about this alien race of like lizard people overtaking the Earth and living in the center of the hollowed out Earth and have overtaken all government positions and stuff. I didn't care for it. It's really, it's like, it's only 40 minutes, but it was too long for me. It was so boring. It wasn't particularly interesting because it does that, but also like half of it's about the real world involvement of the United States and Latin America. Like, that half is legitimately interesting and kind of fascinating. The other half is about aliens and lizard people and shit. I did not care for whatsoever. That half I was bored out of my mind, and it's intercut together. So, I didn't care for it. I don't recommend it. Phantom Limb from 2005, another documentary. This is a real documentary about, directed by Jay Rosenblatt, who's a terrific short form filmmaker. If you're into that, he's terrific. This one is about the death of his younger brother when they were young children. And it's about that and about really just the grief cycle and how you don't ever really get over it. Like, it's both from Jay's perspective as losing a brother, losing a sibling, but it's also kind of from his parents' perspective of what does it mean to lose a child so early in their life. His brother died when he was like 5. So it's, how does a parent deal with that and that kind of a grief, and do people ever truly get over that kind of grief or not? Very fascinating, very emotionally moving film here. Loved it. Triple X 3, The Return of Xander Cage from last year. I didn't care for it. There's a lot of stupid action sequences that I did enjoy because they were so bizarre and so insane. like Vin Diesel. He like skis off the top of like a power, like a cell phone tower or something. And he like skis off of it, skis down a grassy mountainside, and then like skateboards through a town and shit. Like it's nuts. The action sequences are insane and are legitimately entertaining. The problem is the rest of the movie's awful. So, you know, watch it if you're into super nuts and impossible action sequences and don't care about a decent story. Definitely check this out. So if you like Fast and Furious, this is your kind of shit here. But I despised it. What else can go real quick? That's about it as far as movies that can go real fast. This won't take too long. A Wrinkle in Time from this year. I didn't like it. I like Ava DuVernay in general. She has a great knack for visuals, for interesting shots, for spectacular visuals. Like Selma is a visually stunning film and is also great on many other levels, but it is a very visually stunning film, especially for, you know, like a biopic about, you know, about race relations in you know, in the rural South during the civil rights movement. You know, for being that, it's a very visually stunning film. And this one is, you know, she's really good at how to set a scene and how to make something look interesting. She's good at that. The problem here is that everything else sucks about this movie. It turns kind of into this overblown CGI fest in the last 20 minutes. The story to me wasn't even interesting, which is kind of an issue with the book too. I've read the book. I don't recall anything about the damn book, but I didn't care for the story of this. I didn't find it to be particularly interesting. I didn't find it emotionally moving. I didn't really like it whatsoever. Now, I will say Reese Witherspoon and Mindy Kaling, and I don't know the actor, but the main girl's younger brother, they all know what movie they're in. They know they're in a silly, fun, CGI-laden adventure flick. They know they're in that, and they're just having a blast. They're a lot of fun. The problem is, like, Oprah and the main chick and the main dude and Chris Pine and Zach Galifianakis and the main girl's mother and the principal, they all think they're in a super serious, tense, dramatic piece of work. They're not. They're not good. It's not good. It's not interesting. It's not what it should be. This should be a lighthearted, fun romp of a film. And that is the movie that Reese Witherspoon and Mindy Kaling and the main girl's younger brother character are in. And they are legitimately fun. The problem is everyone else thinks they're in this super tense, tight, dramatic piece of filmmaking, and they ain't. They're in a silly little fun adventure film. And it kind of falls, it feels weird watching that. And it's not particularly interesting. I didn't like it much. Moving on to The Commuter, also from this year. Jaume Collet-Serra, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He's one of those filmmakers who I've always been like, okay, I'll watch his movie, but even without ever having loved anything he's done. Like, it's either gone from decent to, okay, that was pretty good. Like, The Shallows, I enjoyed. His last thing with Neeson was that Nonstop, I think. I enjoyed that one. They were okay movies, nothing spectacular, nothing I ever plan on ever watching again. They were okay movies, though, and this falls right in line. Now, I will say the first hour of this movie is an incredible movie. The first hour is really good. The first hour is this very tense, tight mystery thriller type movie. It's really, really good. The problem then is after that, we get into this insanely stupid and convoluted action conspiracy movie that I did not like. So the first hour is terrific. The last half hour, 40 minutes, no, did not care for it. Basically, once we get to, there's a bit where they're on this train, right? And the train gets derailed near the end. Like, once that happens, everything after that is bad. I did not care for after that. Everything before that, after about the first 5 to 10 minutes, like the opening credit sequence, or before the credits, but the opening sequence, I was lost. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Because, like, they try to show us 3 different days or 3 different times or something, all at the same time, like intercut with each other. Is really hard to follow. At the start is, at least to me, I was like, what the wait, what's going on, huh? What? But they stopped that real quick, thankfully. And then it gets really good after the first 5 or 10 minutes. And then, it's really good for about a solid 50 minutes. It's incredible. Then after that, once the train gets derailed and turns into this like hostage thriller conspiracy movie, falls apart. I don't care for it at that point. But that first hour or so, really damn good. I want to see that movie made even longer. That's the movie I want to see. I don't want to see the way this actually ends. I didn't care for that. Okay, I've only got a few more films to get through. So Phantom Thread. This was from last year, and damn, this was incredible. This is one of my favorites from last year. Here, I'll tell you. I'll say that now. We're gonna do a revisit to last year's films. At the end of last year, we did our best of the year. Our 10 favorite. Both me and my co-host did our favorites of the year and stuff. We're going to revisit that at the halfway point of this year. We'll talk about our favorites from the year so far. And we're going to look back at last year because there's a lot of stuff that both of us, mostly me, have seen from last year that we didn't get a chance to last year, So Phantom Thread, one of my favorites now. This is incredible. Paul Thomas Anderson has long been one of my favorite filmmakers working, and this shoots him right back up there into that top tier, right, with Chris Nolan and Guillermo del Toro and Wes Anderson. He's right back up there in my top tier of my favorite filmmaker. Alex Garland too is up there. So he's right back up there now after this. Jesus Christ. So this is a movie about artistic obsession, about the havoc that an obsessive artist can wreak upon their lover, upon their family, upon their employees. This is a topic that was also explored by Mother, another movie I loved from last year. This one does it in a more literal sense than Mother did, which was all a metaphorical movie. But we can talk about Mother some other day. But God, that was an incredible film too. Anywho, Phantom Thread. So really great, and it is kind of about, you know, fucked up people coming to love each other for how fucked up they are. That's kind of what the ending leaves you with. Daniel Day-Lewis is incredible, as he always is. I mean, he's Daniel Day-Lewis. Of course he's incredible. He's as incredible as ever here in this film as the insanely named oh God, what was it? It was insane. It was an absolute insane name. Oh boy. Reynolds Woodcock. That's his name. Reynolds Woodcock. That's a nutso name. But anyway, who's a fashion designer, a dressmaker. He designs and makes dresses for, at this point, pretty much exclusively like rich aristocrats at this point in his career. And he meets this young girl while he's out for lunch or dinner at some Italian restaurant, or not really an Italian restaurant, but he's out for dinner at a restaurant and becomes interested in a particular waitress, Alma, played by Vicky Krieps, who's really, really good as well in her role here. So he meets her, and she becomes his muse, who he uses to reach a new level of inspiration for the remaining years of his time as a professional dressmaker, essentially. And then it turns into kind of a romance between him and her, and we really get a look at how sort of fucked up of an individual he is, and kind of the lengths that she is willing to go to stay with him and to kind of be in a relationship and eventually marry him. And it's very interesting. Paul Thomas Anderson knocks it out of the park with this thing. It's just incredible from start to finish. I loved it. You know, some people will say, oh, it was really, oh, it's so boring. Nothing happens. No one shoots each other. Like, you know, they don't. Like, that doesn't need to be in every movie. There doesn't need to be this big action set piece. This is just a nice, simple, but deeply disturbing character-driven drama about this dressmaker and his young muse and his sister. And it's really damn good, and I really, really love the thing. So I highly recommend it. Loved it deeply. Now, let's talk about A Quiet Place for a minute. I thought it was okay. You know, I loved the premise, the whole, you know, sound will get you killed, so you had to be super quiet. I liked the premise, and I loved how, you know, John Krasinski went full head on into that. Into, we're going to make the movie super quiet, little to no dialogue. I loved that aspect of it. I loved. There were just some logical problems I had with the movie that were like, well, if that's the case, how did they do this? Why wouldn't they live here? Why would they stay here? Why didn't they do that before? Like, there were just a lot of those kind of things that eventually just kept stacking up to the point where I was like, okay, this fell apart a little bit for me. But that aside, I still did enjoy it. I highly recommend this film. I recommend trying to see it in the quietest theater you can. So, you know, for me, that means going on a non-Friday weekday, like a middle of the week, like Tuesday at like 1 o'clock or like 2:30 in the afternoon, something like that. Where like the kids are still in school, the employed people, the people who, you know, have full-time jobs are still at work. So there's hardly anyone there. And the people that are there are going to be like me, who are here because they either have to come see movies because, you know, they get paid to write and or talk about the movies. So, you know, they're going to be quiet and respectful of this, or the people who are legitimately big-time film people who just want to see this movie because they're really into films or whatnot, you know. So it's going to be mostly older people who are going to be quiet and respectful, or it's going to be people like you, like me, maybe you, who are, you know, who have to be here because we got to get paid somehow. So, you know, so that's my recommendation. That's my recommendation for any movie, really. If you have that luxury, you should try to be going on like random weekdays at afternoon times where people are at work, kids are at school. So it's only going to be people like you and me who legitimately love film, or whose job it is to watch as many movies as they can, so that no one's going to be super loud, super noisy, and fuck up your movie experience. You know, that's my recommendation for any movie. You know, I know sometimes it's hard to resist, you know. Even I went to Last Jedi nighttime premiere, but, you know, if possible, that would be my recommendation, especially for a quiet place. This is a movie you want to see in a quiet environment, in a quiet theater. If you don't think that's going to be possible for you, you got to wait for this thing on DVD, on Blu-ray. I'm sorry, you do, because it's a film that you have to be in a quiet environment where you can just sit there and focus on this movie, or it won't work as well as it does. It works very well. There's just some logical inconsistencies, that a bit too many of them, that piled up to me for the point to where I was actively questioning how this movie was really working. And then I will say the creature work, the creature design on the aliens or whatever, you know, the creatures here, the work on them is stunning. They are terrific. They look really cool and really disgusting too. So I quite enjoyed the creature work. Suicide Squad: Hell to Pay, animated film. One of one of DC's latest animated works. Speaking of which, there's another movie I need to add to this that I, for some reason, didn't put on here. Anywho, Suicide Squad: Hell to Pay is what the live-action movie should have been. You know, I quite enjoyed it. It's nothing new. It's nothing really remarkable. It does attempt to tell a story about spirituality, kind of like it gets into that a little bit, which is kind of interesting. But, you know, it's a solid endeavor. It definitely, for me, felt a bit too long. You know, there were some parts that were bogged down a little bit, that were a bit too slow for even my liking, which is a remarkable achievement if you can make something that's too slow, even for me. You know, and I'm a guy who would love to see a 4-hour cut of Blade Runner 2049. You know, this felt a bit too long. There were segments that were a bit too slow for me, and some unclear motivations on some of the characters. So that could have just been because I wasn't paying super close attention for the entire movie, because I said a bit bored at moments. But all in all, a fine addition to the DC animated universe of films. Let's talk about another one of those, Batman Ninja. This came out this year. This was fucking great. I loved this movie. So Batman Ninja, to me, there are two ways you can make an incredible Batman film. You can either do what Chris Nolan did and make The Dark Knight, which, incredible, incredible film there. Or you can go this route, which is the kind of more fun, silly, action-y Batman. This is what I think Schumacher was trying to do with Batman and Robin and, failed miserably. But this is kind of what he was trying to do, I think, in terms of tone. Fun, a little bit silly, but utterly ridiculous, but awesome in terms of action stuff. So this has that. This does touch upon some Dark Knight-esque ideas in terms of, what does it truly mean to be Batman and what does it truly mean to be a hero? Now, the premise for Batman Ninja is nuts. So Gorilla Grodd invents a time machine and maybe accidentally, maybe not, it's not entirely clear, sends, most of the Batman universe to feudal Japan. So he sends, himself, Joker, Harley Quinn, Two-Face, Deathstroke, Poison Ivy, the Penguin, Batman, Catwoman, Alfred, Nightwing, Red Robin, Robin, and Red Hood, all back in time to feudal Japan. But due to some fuck up, everyone but Batman arrives 2 years earlier. Batman arrives 2 years later than everyone else, somehow. So, convenient plot setup, basically. But the one thing I will commend and also downgrade Batman Ninja on at the same time is that it doesn't really have a plot. Like, the plot is just there to get us from action sequence to action sequence, where it's like, samurai sword fight. Oh, God. I know. The Joker sends flower bombs, which cause horses to go crazy and destroy the castle. That's it. It's that kind of plot where it's like, okay, we figured out the action sequences we want, and now let's figure out a way how to get from one to the next. It's that kind of a plot. But there is some very interesting stuff done here on a non-action sequence level. There is some interesting character stuff. As I said, there's the stuff with Batman near the end, where it's and near the middle, where it's kind of, it's Batman's in feudal Japan, and he is transported back with all of his gadgets and technology, but once he exhausts it, he's out of it, and then it's well, what is Batman if he doesn't have, who and what is Batman if he doesn't have his Batmobile and his plane and his guns and all this shit, who and what is Batman if he doesn't have all that kind of stuff, right? Gets into that a little bit. It does kind of get into some weird, for a minute, but what would have been incredible if they stuck with it, Joker stuff, where there's a moment where the Joker and Harley Quinn get blown up, and of course they survive it, because of course they do. It's Batman. Everyone survives pretty much. And the movie plays it that they lost their memory and therefore are no longer Joker and Harley Quinn. They're just random normal people who, because they're in feudal Japan, they take up farming. And if the movie had stuck with that, that could have been incredible. That could have been very intriguing, of the Joker and Harley Quinn now, instead of being psychotic, evil, fucked up individuals, are now standard human beings who just want a simple farming life. That could have been very intriguing and very touching. if they stuck with that. Unfortunately, they don't. You know, within a minute, Joker and Harley Quinn are back to themselves after that. So, you know, but for that 2-minute segment we spent on that, it's really, really, really great. And then they kind of ruin that. But I will say we get one of the most absurd but absolutely incredible action sequences I have seen in a Batman film. I'll get to that here in a minute. But I love this. The animation is really, really interesting, very uniquely done. It's kind of half cell shaded, and parts of it are like watercolor. Part of it's oil painting animation. Like it's all very a lot of different animation styles blended into one, which is very interesting visually. So I quite enjoyed that. But here's this action sequence. So if everything I've said so far hasn't sold you on the movie, let me sell you on Batman Ninja here real quick. So Batman Ninja features a action sequence in which a giant Voltron-esque robot put together through the castles of that the Joker, the Penguin, Deathstroke, Two-Face, Poison Ivy, and Gorilla Grodd have all built. Their robot castle tanks transform together to form this giant Voltron-esque robot, which fights a entity that is in the shape of a giant Batman, which is made up entirely of monkeys and actual bats put together, and they fight each other. And also the Joker and Batman have a samurai sword fight on top of a roof. Like, it's awesome stuff here. I love the action sequences, and I actually enjoyed the story when it was there. So now, speaking of something I did not enjoy one bit, Ready Player One. Good God, this is a mess. I will say this. I read the book, and I liked the movie more than I liked the book. But I fucking hated this movie, but liked it more than I did the book. I will say there is a sequence, spoilers, where they go, where the group goes into The Shining, which was the only moment where I was thoroughly sitting here going, okay, that's cool. You know, it's not really thematically or story-wise terribly interesting or anything, but okay, that's cool. I like that. But the rest of it, you know, this is a story, the book more so than the movie, that is built entirely around pop culture of the 80s. Now, the book is like pretty much entirely the 80s. The movie at least gets like some like 70s and a couple more recent things in there too, but not much. And I hated this. Like, if it, you know, here's the thing. I said the same thing about the book to myself and anyone who asked me, is that if you watch this, if you take it as just a endless string of pop culture references and not as a legitimate story, it works. It's fine. It's entertaining. As just that, it's entertaining. The problem is when you have to take this in particular as a film, as a story, it falls apart and it falls flat because none of it is particularly engaging. It's basically just dude likes chick and wants to bone her and gets to at the end. Like, that's essentially the whole story. Which is not, you know, like, I've seen that same story, you know, approximately 10,000 times before. I'm good on seeing it again. So as a story, this thing's awful. There to me could have been a compelling story here that could have been looked at from many different angles. And I think every angle is way too ballsy, way too interesting for a filmmaker like Steven Spielberg to do. Like, these would have been way too complex and way too interesting of ideas for Spielberg to ever tackle, because he's Spielberg. He doesn't make anything interesting. He just makes fun little action shit. He doesn't make interesting films, if you ask me. So there were a few things that you could have got out of this that could have been very interesting if you wanted to get it out of this. Now, this is partially Spielberg's fault, partially the fault of the fact that you let Ernest Cline, who wrote the book, write the screenplay. Is also partially the problem. So you could have looked at this as kind of a pseudo horror film, where in a couple ways you could have looked at it in the way that this film is presented. It would be a very compelling horror flick. It would be a compelling and terrifying film. And this is a terrifying movie if you think about it, because essentially what happens is that any and all pop culture doesn't stop. Okay, it doesn't stop, but it cycles back to the point where people no longer give a fuck, that everyone and everything goes back and reverts to the 1980s, that pop culture essentially stopped being memorable at 1989, with a couple exceptions. Apparently Minecraft and Halo are the only things after like 1992 that are apparently culturally significant, at least from what I saw in the movie. Which is a terrifying idea. Now, I'm sure that's probably the world that Steven Spielberg lives in. And that's probably the world that most, 40 plus people live in, probably, is this world where nothing past 1992 is good or is worth a damn or is worth thinking or remembering whatsoever. That's probably the world Steven Spielberg lives in, is that any pop culture made after like 1990 is not worth thinking about, is not worth remembering, is just a hunking pile of shit that no one should care about. That may be the world he lives in, and that is probably the world most 40 or 50-year-old plus people live in, but like, that's a horrifying idea, because essentially the way I was thinking about it is, because this is set in like 2040, or something. So it's like, okay, so the culture reverts 60 years back. So to me, like, I just thought about it in a modern context for a second. I was like, so basically, this same thing would happen if this were today, where if today, all of a sudden, everyone wanted to live in and basically lived in culturally the 1950s? Like, what? That would be awful, right? Like, no one would be down for that. No one would be down to do that. But that's essentially the film, we go back 60 years. So so we want to live in the 1950s. Now, yeah, sure, probably large constituents of the Republican Party would love that, because then it's, well, the blacks have like no rights, basically. So that would be cool. But, most of us, that would be, an atrocious travesty of a world to live in. Well, that's essentially kind of what Ready Player One is, except we're stuck in the 80s, which, is better than that, because, like, okay, well, black people are at least recognized as human beings mostly now, at least. Okay, that's cool. But, you know, nothing else is really that great about the 80s anymore. Like, okay. But of course, you know, that's not the part that matters. You know, it's not the political or social elements of that time period. It's just the music, the movies, the TV shows of that time that matter. You know, which, I mean, that would be bad too. Like, I don't want to fucking sit around and watch, you know, like I wouldn't mind sitting around and watching I Love Lucy all day, but you know, if I have to sit around and watch, you know, God, what, Bonanza or something all day, like, God, I'd be out of my goddamn mind real quick. You know, I don't want to sit around and watch John Wayne movies. No, like, so that idea is kind of terrifying, that all of pop culture, all movies and music and video games and television stops at the year of 1990. No one remembers or cares about anything after 1990. That is just such a terrifying and awful idea, even if that is the reality that there are people in today that those people live in who only care about stuff from that time period. Yeah, I'm sure there are people like that. I know there are people like that. But that doesn't mean that that's who we want to, what we as an entire human race want to live in. That would make no sense. Then you also could have a compelling film about how reality sucks so much, that the reality we live in is so awful that the only way for us to cope with it is to forget about it and basically live entirely in a computerized digital environment. That would be compelling. That could be interesting. But no, we don't go there at all. You know, the other thing that I hated about this movie, which this is the same case in the book, is that at the end, you know, after Wade wins the contest and is like a billionaire, you know, trillionaire or something now. Like, now this is slightly different because in the book it's never explicitly stated what he does with the money and anything, except he splits it 5 ways with all his friends. But in the movie, you know, what you would expect, or what I would have expected, or what I hoped for, was that he would use these billions upon billions of dollars he now has to better the lives of everyone in the world, to try to repair some of the awful damage done to the environment and to the world by humanity, to try to improve everyone's reality. No, what does he do? He says, no, fuck it. We're going to turn off this internet. We're going to turn off the digital world for 2 days a week and force everyone to live in this shitty environment after now I bought my giant mansion and have this girl I can fuck all day now. Like, you know, I'm set. I've bettered my environment, but everyone else has to go live in their shitty reality for 2 more days a week now because I mandated it. Like, I legitimately actually thinking about it now, Wade might be evil, thinking about it. That would be interesting too if this movie ended up, like, it isn't, because it's Spielberg. He isn't going to pull off this kind of a complex idea. But what if, with this movie, every character, everyone is evil? Like, everyone's bad. Because, like, Wade only cares about himself, only cares about getting his dick wet and about bettering his environment. All of his friends are that same way, except for the, you know, fucking, they only care about getting their environment better and becoming rich. Then the guy who created the Oasis is an evil mastermind because he has single-handedly reverted the world back to the 1980s. oh my God, I think I just figured it out. Oh, wow. If that was actually the case, which is not, that would make this movie incredible. It's not, though. That's not the case, unfortunately. Well, I need to write that down or I'll forget about that when I bring this up in my worst movies of the year so far discussion. Everyone evil makes this great. I'll make that note. Okay. I have one more movie and 3 TV shows to discuss here. So, Jesus, this is going to be 3 hours. Boy. I should have done this in 2 parts, 2 nights, shouldn't I? God. It's only 2 a.m. here for me. That's nice. Anyway. So Crazy Ex-Girlfriend Season 3. I talked about the first 2 seasons. Last month, I finished Season 3 on April 1st. So I did that kind of thing again this month, but I said, fuck it. I'm going to talk about it tonight because I don't want to do this again where when it's that close, because I think I finished Season 3 at I think I posted my shortened Twitter review at 1 in the morning on April 1st or something. I think that's what happened. So I did that again except I did it this afternoon. So, but I didn't want to do that again and break something up over a whole month. So anyway, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend Season 3. This one features in episode 3 or 4, I forget which, one of the two, a absolutely stunning narrative turn where Rebecca Bunch is finally confronted with her issues, and it doesn't immediately, but she does eventually come to terms with being willing to receive help for her mental issues. And it's a stunning episode that kind of turns into a horror film for a little bit, at least in terms of the way it's shot. It turns into a horror film, which is very interesting. Very well done, too. And ends with an incredible song called The End of the Movie from Josh Groban, of all people. Which, Josh Groban, not someone I care for, but he did one hell of a job with that song. Once again, reiterating, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is a musical, romantic, comedic drama, kind of. It's very hard to categorize. The one thing I can say for sure is it's a musical television. It's a TV show that is also a musical, which I'd never seen done before. I'd seen it done before with Gallivant, I think, the Weird Al one in medieval times that I didn't care too much for, but whatever. Anywho, so that's Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, is a musical, romantic, comedy, drama show about people with debilitating mental health issues. Kind of. It's very hard to categorize the show beyond it's a musical. It's hard to categorize anything else about the show. But in this season, we learn the true depth of Rebecca's issues and how fucked up of an individual she can be at times, which is very interesting to explore, especially the protagonist, the main character of our show, is potentially willing to murder to get what she wants, and not in the action hero, way, in the legitimate criminal way. And this season as a whole is just so incredible. We deal with that. We deal with the fallout of a failed suicide attempt, which is like this whole season of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Like the first 2 seasons are delightful and have moments of this kind of emotional depth to them, but are mostly just delightful little fun times. This season is a fucking gut punch to it, where it's like every episode after the first couple, you sit there after it ends, after the credits start rolling, going, oh my God, what in the world? And you feel like shit after it. And it's great, and I loved it, and I can't wait to see season 4. And I can't recommend this enough, and I've never seen anything like this on television before. This is such an incredible show. It's all on Netflix. That's where I watched it. So you desperately need to hop on that shit right now, man. This thing is incredible. Another television show I watched, Nailed It, which came out this year. This is Nicole Byer, who the only reason I know her is from How Did This Get Made? That great podcast, which is the only reason I heard about the show. Was one of the hosts of the show highly recommended this show to the listeners. So I decided to check it out, and yeah, I really enjoyed Nailed It. I liked this a lot. It's a cooking show, but it's a comedic version of a traditional like cooking show. So they bring in average, everyday people who have baked before and enjoy baking, but kind of suck at it. They invite them to come and attempt to replicate masterworks of baked goods. And of course, they all failed miserably at it, but it is hilarious to watch. Nicole Byer is hilarious. The guest hosts she brings on guest judges are hilarious as well. And just all in all, a great show. Highly recommended. It's only 6 episodes. It's all on Netflix. They're like 35, 40 minutes. So, it's quick. You could watch this whole show in a night. 6 quick episodes. Really great. Really funny. Highly, highly recommend. Nailed It. So the last show and movie I have to discuss, Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, which is a Japanese anime from 89 or 90 maybe. The movie was 91. I think the show may have been 1990 through 91. So it's 39 episodes was the show, and then a 90-minute movie. So the show was great. I loved the show. The first 22, 23 episodes or so are really good, really interesting, very intriguing. We start off in 1890 Paris. We end up on a futuristic submarine. This whole show takes a lot of inspiration from the works of Jules Verne, and particularly 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is at least how it's described on the Wikipedia page for the show. Which I don't know. I've never read any of Jules Verne's books. I think I own Journey to the Center of the Earth out there, but I haven't read it yet. I haven't read any of his stuff. But so they then get aboard a submarine, and we learn about the blue water, this gem that Nadia possesses. She doesn't know why or how. She doesn't know who her parents are. She doesn't know where she was born or anything. And we learn all about that kind of stuff throughout the show. We learn the true identity of her father, where her father is now, where she's from, why that is. We learn about a lot of stuff, and it's really, really interesting. There's a lot of stuff running through here that's very Miyazaki-esque, which, according to the Wikipedia page, this is from a Miyazaki story that they kind of adapted, that Miyazaki kind of wrote the general outline of the show here, and it feels like that because there's a lot of stuff going on here about the violent nature of humanity and the horrors of war and being orphaned and finding a family, a surrogate family in your friends or, you know, surrogate parenting, a lot of that kind of stuff that Miyazaki loves to talk about. There's, you know, environmental stuff in here, you know, a lot of Miyazaki's favorite stuff, you know, like in Princess Mononoke or Grave of the Fireflies. You know, I don't think he did that one. You know, typical Miyazaki topics, but they're done in a very interesting and different way to me. Now, I will say that episodes, I want to say 25 to about 30 or 31, there's like 5 or 6 near the end. There's 5 or 6 there that are just awful to me, that felt like I wasn't watching the same show, because they got into like weird fan service moments, which were insanely weird later thinking about it, because later in the show we learn that Nadia is supposed to be 14 while all this is happening. And so then you're like, wait, this show, you know, 7 episodes ago was sexualizing and showing us this 14-year-old girl's tits. What? Which was nuts to me. Yeah, so I didn't care for those bits, you know, the fan service. And then there were moments that, you know, for a good 5 episodes. So the main male character is Jean, or Jean, probably, because he's French. It's probably Jean, but I'm going to call him Jean because it's what has been in my head for the last week while I've been watching the show. So Jean is super into science and big into inventing things, right? That's mostly what he's into. But he's also, you know, sympathetic and cares a lot about Nadia and about her, even though he doesn't really know her terribly well. He cares about her deeply as a friend and as a person. And then for a good solid 5 episodes, Jean's character turns from being that, who's very complex and thoughtful and intelligent and smart. For about 5 episodes, he turns into, the nicest way I can put this is he turns into a horny jackass who cares only about how he can fuck Nadia. That then becomes his character for 5 episodes, which is really jarring to me, because I'm like, wait, this doesn't jive. But after about 5 episodes, we get back to the normal stuff that was going on before that. So I don't know what the fuck that happened there with the production team on those 5 episodes, but I don't know what the fuck they were doing. But you can skip those. You know, spoilers here, I'll tell you the ones. So after the Nautilus gets sunk, and Jean, Nadia, and Marie and King are stuck on an island, you can skip everything until after the typhoon, which brings another island to them. So you can skip everything up to that. Then I think there's 2 episodes that are really good there that feature something called the Red Noah. Then after the Red Noah, there's about another 2 or 3 episodes that suck up until what happens. God, I forget what happened. I just watched this today, so I should remember. Or yesterday, I guess now, but So, oh, right. It's when the Nautilus returns. So basically, you can skip everything of them being on the island by themselves, then watch the 2 Red Noah episodes. Then you can skip everything until the Nautilus comes back like 2 or 3 episodes later. You can skip like about 5 or 6 episodes there in the middle there because they're just worthless to me. But I loved the show as a whole, but those 5 episodes were so fucking stupid. Did not care for them at all. Now the movie. I watched the movie as well today. The movie came out in 91. I didn't care for the movie. The biggest problem for me with the movie is that in the finale of the show, we're told that Nadia and Jean get married and presumably have children together. So then in the movie, that's completely disregarded. They've basically gone their separate ways. Nadia lives in London. Jean lives by himself in France now, inventing shit. Nadia's working in a newspaper in London now. And they've apparently never talked for years. So, I don't know. And then also in the finale of the show, the blue water. So major spoilers. Nadia uses. So it turns out Nadia's an alien or something. And the blue water is a powerful key that allows her to rule over the kingdom of Atlantis and basically enslave humanity if she wishes to. So in the finale, Nadia uses her blue water and her father, who's Captain Nemo, her father's blue water. She uses them both to resurrect Jean from the dead after Lord Gargoyle kills him. She uses them to resurrect Jean from the dead, but at the cost of the blue waters no longer functioning, and therefore her forsaking her title as the ruler of, as the Queen of Atlantis, basically. So they do keep that. They don't ignore that. The problem then is that the movie is inherently uninteresting because none of the interesting elements are possible anymore. And it's just your generic sci-fi tale of psychotic madman wants to enslave humanity and rule the world. So in order to do that, he has some cockamamie, insane plan that he's mostly able to execute. But then, of course, ultimately fails and is foiled by our heroes. Your typical movie, and nothing about it's interesting or done in a way that's unusual or something I haven't seen done before. So I didn't care for the movie at all. I will say that the cockamamie plan is a remarkable one. Because at least, because the way that it's set up is that the psychotic madman is attempting and has successfully replaced most people in political places of power with robotic clones that in some form of AI cloud technology possess the exact personalities, thoughts, memories, and act exactly like the people they have replaced. But if they malfunction, the robots evaporate. That's the plan. He's done that and is going to use that to have them enslave all of humanity by essentially starting World War I, given the time that's set. So unfortunately, they lost all the intriguing elements in the show. For the movie, you don't watch the movie. I highly recommend Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, the show, the anime. Highly recommend it. I don't know how easy it is to find. My local library had it, so had the entire DVD set. So you know, I got to for free watch, you know, the show. That's where I get a lot of these, luckily. So yeah, but you know, and as I say with any foreign language show or film, if possible, subbed, not dubbed, if at all possible for you. So that will be it for this episode of Unspooled. This is a long one. I'll keep this in mind for May to do this in 2 videos instead of 1. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more great content like this. Until the next episode, goodbye.